Ready to take a tour of the Shawshank Redemption prison. Let's see what's inside. Freedom is the most valuable thing known to man by an inmate. This is actually the electrocution area, and some of this, of course, was staged for Shawshank Redemption. But OSR was known for handling electrocutions and executions. This is the mask that would be put over the inmate's head prior to execution. And this was just some of the time and change things that they were showing for historical purposes. And there's Sparky. And of course they have the mannequin there to show what it looked like. This next room is the area where the guards would wait to hear regarding the execution, if their stay was actually granted by the governor. If you've never watched the Shawshank Redemption, please do so. It's very interesting. They have a lot of memorabilia to share. This is the room where Morgan Freeman went before the parole board, and they have his uniform costume that he wore in the movie. And wonderful, wonderful self-guided tour if you're ever interested in going to the Shawshank prison. The tour, they have a lot of interactive TVs. You can take a guided tour to hear about escape attempts, history about the prison. So as we begin our tour, I happen to see this creepy silhouette. Makes you think about where you're at. This prison was built in the late 1800s as a facility for first offending young men. They didn't want to put them in the general population with repeat offenders in hopes for a better rehabilitation structure. Been a lot of paranormal activities in this prison, and this room here, the single chair room, has had a lot of activity. It gives you a creepy feeling in here, and they make it very clear not to shut the door. And it's just an empty room. But there's a bad vibe in that room for sure. They've heard footsteps in there. You will be in there by yourself and you'll hear footsteps around you, and there's nobody in there with you. The prison is where they filmed Shawshank, and this is the room that's posed as the hotel where, when released from the Shawshank, Brooks and Red went to stay. And it's kind of neat to be here when you've seen it on the movie. And it's set up the same way as it was in the movie. Pretty interesting. This is just an empty room that I assume was one of the guards' quarters. And you can see the paint is just very dilapidated. And in person, this doesn't do it justice. It's a very creepy building. We're going to go to the next floor, to the chapel area. That went further out, but look at this chapel. They are doing some renovations, but this is what it looked like at one time. And now it's just, there's the altar. And these benches are the original benches. Everything's original. They haven't done anything different. But we're going to go back out into where the holding cells were. And when I say I was getting anxiety from the heights, I'm not lying. It made me a nervous wreck. Just the oldness of it, being that high up, wondering if these bars were still secure. This is a 5-floor prison, and they did executions here, as I had mentioned before. You could get lost in this place. There are so many back rooms, so many dark areas. It's very creepy. makes you wonder about the history. And this is actually one of the cell rooms. They weren't very big. Men were put in here for years and years and years. Sometimes one, sometimes two. And going through the tour, we found that there were times that there were more than 2 men per cell block. 22-year-old man actually committed suicide by putting himself on fire in this cell block here. Many, many tragedies. And that's a spiral staircase that goes the entire 5 floors. We're going to go into the hospital. This area held all the beds. This is where the doctors and nurses worked. And they show a photo of the full amount of beds that were in here. Very limited on health care in the prison. Many didn't survive once they came into this area. The original structure is still intact. It's built very well. The paint falling off the ceilings. We're now going to go into the outside area so you can see the overwhelming height. Each floor holding so many cells that men were put in. We're now in the shower area, and the piping system that you see in the upper right hand side, those are the showers. And they would just stand there. The water would drain through the grates on the floor. And this is that spiral staircase from the bottom looking up. It's crazy how I couldn't imagine climbing up that thing. Not at all. Not really sure what this is for, but it is a silo type structure, all round brick, no windows, and creepy. Again, this is a view of how many cells, and this is just on the west wing. We have multiple wings. Originally, there were only 150 prisoners who were brought to this prison on opening day. And it was a big deal. People came from all over to see these prisoners paraded out. They handed them cigars, young men. And they were excited to come here. And this is where their food would get given to them. They have since put those white chain link on there. And this is a silo room. You misbehave while you're in cell block, they would throw you in there until they knew what to do with you. It looked longer, but this is the tunnel Andy actually crawled through for his escape out of Shawshank. We're off to the hole. This was solitary confinement, and it actually goes around in a circle. There are about 50 different holding tanks. Only enough for one person. You were lucky if you had a bed or any type of restroom capabilities, washing your hands. Doors were normally closed, of course, and there are no windows. You sat in the dark until they decided to bring you out of solitary confinement. We were actually told that the majority of the time they were given scraps to eat, whatever they could find, including bugs. And they would grind them up and give them to the inmates in solitary confinement. This is another one of those holding cells that they put a stool in. These are sporadically in the area across from the cells fighting. They would throw you in there until they remembered that they put you in there. A lot of pain and despair in this prison. And this area, a lot of people jumped from the upper balcony areas. Some were pushed. A lot of restless souls in this prison. They also have the area that shows the official dining room, meeting room. When officials would come, they have a cafeteria and a museum on site. And what's amazing is that for all the tragedy inside, it's beautiful outside.